All right, this is Truth Be Told. We're doing a special edition right here on a Tuesday afternoon, or morning, I guess. It depends where you're at. I'm Tony Sweet. Guess who's in studio?
Captain Ron actually made it.
I know.
Are you in studio? Because I'm actually in the studio.
Well,
Can't tell where you are.
I'm in a hidden bunker.
Okay.
Yeah, so just in case, something happens, somebody has to survive and repopulate.
Might as well be you.
Repopulate the planet. So we have a great guest for you guys today. We coming up this weekend is Conscious Life Expo. Normally I get to go live, but Captain Ron's going to be attending. I'm going to be out of town. It's my turn to be out of town. But we have a great guest from Conscious Life Expo. She's going to be a speaker there, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, who is a futurist trained in cognitive neuroscience. She is the co-author of the Premonition Code, and we're going to find out what that is. It's going to be exciting to talk to her. Her research focuses on cognitive and the possibility of time travel. This is something that we've touched on several times on Truth Be Told.
Absolutely.
And we want to touch on that today, and how artificial intelligence can convey unconditional love. So, Captain Ron, you've been doing some research on this too.
I have. It's great to have you on the show, Doctor. I think this is more up our alley, at least for me, because it seems like this is a science-based look at precognition. Is that true, Doctor? Is this more of you're taking a scientific approach to this, right? Because we're doing a lot of the conscious life people, and it's not scientific at all. It's just they see orbs around my body and they tell me things.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's great to be on the show. And yeah, I would say, I've always been a scientist. Even since I was a kid, I considered myself a scientist because I had a scientific way of thinking. You never know. Seeing orbs around you could in 50 years be the complete cutting edge of science. We have no idea. But right now, it's probably not.
Yeah, it feels not to me. It's really hard for me to buy into that stuff. I try to take a little more data. I know you like data as well, which is how I feel about this thing. Although I still kind of doubt, I don't understand how the precognition thing works. Do you want to explain that to our audience?
I would love, my whole life goal is to explain how precognition works. Unfortunately, no one knows.
Well, there you go, right?
But I could tell you some stories about ideas about it that are vague. But the most important sort of take-home message is that the current state of the science is that anyone who looks relatively deeply into the precognition literature and has a scientific mindset and some scientific training says there's something going on there. And the question is, what is going on there? And then anyone who has had precognitive experiences themselves or seemingly precognitive experiences, and anyone who has done the experiments and seen the data knows that there's definitely something that is not currently explained going on. That is sort of the summary of the field. And so I'm one of the people who has not only had precognitive or seemingly precognitive experiences myself. They're called spontaneous precognitive experiences or premonitions when you have them in your life. And then in the lab, it's called precognition, so knowing before. And I can say that we don't get it. We don't get how it's working. And there's lots of ideas about it. And it's a really interesting area of research because right now, physics and philosophy and even neuroscience are all fields that are struggling with what is the nature of time. And so since we don't get the nature of time, it's not like we're going to get the nature of precognition right off the bat. So, but also at the same time, so to speak, no pun intended, it also tells you that now is a really good time for opening up these ideas about precognition and time travel, because there's so much confusion about the nature of time that no one can really definitively say this can't work, because everyone's confused about what's going on. If time exists at all, if it's anything other than a human illusion, these kind of things.
Right. I wonder how, but you think you can control this, like you can purposely have precognitive abilities, right? Like not just like in a dream or a flash.
Oh yeah, I don't just think it. It's been shown. So with statistics and science, you can train people to sit down at a desk or with another person and do what I call in the book controlled precognition. and it has been called in the past precognitive remote viewing. So it's a way of getting information essentially psychically, as far as we know, about a future event that no one on the planet knows what the event is until it occurs. So you're not reading minds, you're not, clairvoyantly getting information. These are the kind of things you worry about.
So you're doing the Ghostbusters test where Venkman holds up the card and the other guy guesses. Is that what you're doing?
No, that's telepathy.
Telepathy.
So,
How does that differ? Because that feels like in the
Ron.
same alley there.
Well, so the deal is with precognition, is a proper test of precognition. Literally no one on the planet knows what the answer is until you get there, including the experimenter. So with the Venkman test, like he's looking at the card, he knows it's like a wavy line or whatever.
Right.
Right. That could be telepathy, right? Because all the person has to do is read their mind. So telepathy seems to exist.
Wait, what do you mean all the person has to do is read their mind? You think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, based on the data, there's like decades of data showing that telepathy, especially in the Gansfeld state where you're sensory deprived, there's a small effect size, but it seems to work. So yeah, that is possible. I mean, I haven't seen any data that's suggesting that I haven't seen any studies that convince me that those studies are false, and those studies have been upheld over decades. So yeah.
What does the studies consist of? I mean, is there a certain amount of people that they randomly choose, or is it people that have come forth and said, I have this ability, or I'm seeing premonitions?
Sure. Yeah. Good. Sorry, I just sort of jumped in there.
Oh.
Yeah. I knew what you were going to say.
There you go.
Sorry, it's old joke.
She called me old.
No, my joke was old.
Oh.
No, it's really depends on the study. So if you're a scientist and you're interested in looking at what can the average person do, you're going to get a group of randomly selected people, and you're going to test them on anything that you're interested in to find out if the average person can do that.
Right.
If you're a scientist who's interested in what can skilled people do, you're going to screen for people who claim and have stories that you think are credible, who claim some kind of past experience with whatever you're testing. So let's say you want to see if someone can run a 4-minute mile. If anyone in the world can run a 4-minute mile, if that's what you want to find out, you're going to look for people who run fast, right? And then there's the other kind of study. If your hypothesis is that everyone can run a 4-minute mile, you have a lot of work ahead of you. But
Right.
but you can get a group of people and see if on average they can run a 4-minute mile. So it really depends on what kind of study. Both kinds of studies have been done. And what we know is that it is a lot like athletic skill or musical skill. So some people are naturally talented, and if you nurture their abilities, they can get really good. And most people have some kind of general ability. So it's like saying most people can run. Very few people can run
4-minute mile. Right. Listen, we had this cat on named Joe Gallenberger. I don't know if you are familiar with him, but
No.
I think his is more about the power of intention.
Yeah.
But he does a lot of these studies himself where they literally get 10 people together, and they go to Las Vegas and they all play craps together. And because they're all focused on the number 9 or whatever, they do higher than probability would dictate they should do playing craps. If you had this ability to be precognitive, why wouldn't you go to Vegas and play blackjack and just put it all on? Because you know that there's a king coming or what have you.
Are you talking to me as a person, or are you saying why wouldn't
anybody that has this ability?
Yeah, so people do. There are whole teams of people who do that, just like that team that you talked about with Joe Gallagher. So there's a group called Applied Precog, and you can Google them. And they're a group of people who they often have their conferences in Las Vegas. They're a fun group of people. And they bet on sports games and all sorts of things based on precog. So yeah, that's happening. I'm involved with I'm phasing out my advisorship, but I really have good feelings about, just because I have too many things to do. But there's a company called Soul Rider that is using precognition to try to predict the stock market. And they're basing their plans on 2 years of really good data. So I think this stuff is really just starting to emerge. And the problem is, here's what I think the problem is. Here's why I think people don't believe it. So what we have is we've got two sort of responses. We've got the response of people who are not scientists in the mainstream world, who are used to watching paranormal shows on TV and such. And they tend to want to sensationalize it and make it this, ooh, wow, what crazy, weird kind of thing, even though it's a normal human capacity. And then you've got scientists who know about those TV shows and know that people want to sensationalize it. And they say, no, we have to look at this scientifically. And they don't know about the research that already has been looking at it for decades. And so they want to deny it and without even knowing anything about it. And my goal is to try to get people to recognize, like, everyone calm down. This is a natural human capacity. It's not always right. It's not always accessible. Not everyone is very skilled at it. If you want to get very skilled at it, even if you have natural talent, you have to train. That's okay. We can help you train. And we could find out more about the mechanisms and really understand why we have this skill and maybe use it to help humanity move forward. So to me, it's trying to put it in its proper perspective is what I'm passionate about, because it's when you discover a hidden skill that for some reason people, for one reason or another, don't want to really admit to, there's got to be a reason for that. And my guess is the reason is that it's a very powerful skill. And
it just seems like it hasn't been done provable enough yet. Vegas would shut down. As soon as somebody was able to really, really do this, not 53% to 47%, but 99% of the time could, or 80% of the time could guess the next blackjack card, they would wipe Vegas out.
But don't they also have people that watch for that, for people that do that,
Yeah,
and they kick them out? They kick them out.
They'll kick you out.
Yeah, they'll kick you out.
They'll accuse you of counting cards.
Yeah.
Right.
They
so
do
like
that a
you
lot.
get kicked out if you're too good. So actually that's part of the game is if you're playing that game and you're really good, you have to know when to walk away.
Okay, what about sports betting? You said they're doing it with sports betting. Somebody could put $1 million on a game because they know who's going to win. And doesn't that also bring in the whole thing?
They do. And then they shut up about it.
Right. I guess. I wonder if I feel though that, like, if that were true, then you are literally blowing up free will completely, because no?
Yeah, we were actually curious about if one is predetermined or precognitive, how is free will? How does it go together?
Right.
Okay, right. So let's talk about that. So do not conflate precognition with predetermination.
Yeah, don't do that, Tony.
Don't do that. It's not okay.
But you're always doing it.
Don't do it. It's always the thing. No, so the deal is just because someone can, at a rate higher than chance, and maybe at 70 or 80%, probability if they're really good, just because someone can predict a future event doesn't mean that that future event is predetermined. So
Well, that's not true at all. If you say, I know the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl, which they're not, if you knew that, then that must be predetermined, because how would you know that and I don't know that?
Well, that's an interesting, those are like three different questions. So
Sorry. I'm trying to be very efficient here. I know we're short on time.
Yeah. So let's go back to all three questions. So
Number one.
One is,
if she says, I knew you were going to ask those three questions, I'm shutting us down.
So no one's perfect. So first of all, no one's 100%. Like, there's no one in the world who's 100% right.
Sorry, Ron.
So what could be going on is that there's high probability, like like if you think about quantum mechanics where everything's piles of probabilities, there could be a high probability that a certain team wins a certain game. And there's 90% probable that they'll win the game. And what you're doing is reading the probabilities, and that's why you're mostly right. But that's why you're not always right, because it doesn't always go. The 90%, sometimes it goes to the 10%, right? So that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is that everything is predetermined, and you're just looking at the exact future, but you have a lot of noise and you can't always do it correctly, and that's why you're not always right. So that would get rid of the free will. Well, I don't know, actually. There's a more complicated philosophical argument about that, but I'm going to put that in the background. And then another way to look at it is that everything's sure, like everything's predetermined, but there's multiple possible predeterminations, which is similar to probability, except with multiple universes. And and so what you're doing is you're both with intention and intuition that has to do with precognition. You're basically creating more have a focus, like a weighted path, more of a likelihood to follow a particular universe path than another path. But even you could argue that predetermination doesn't wipe away free will, just because if it might be, you still have the experience of free will. So it depends on how you define free will. No matter what, we have the experience of free will, whether it reflects reality or not. We also have
whether it really exists or not, we experience free will.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a very good point. That's well put. I've never heard anyone say that so concisely.
Wow, you got a compliment from Captain Ron.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's
Thank you. I'm very proud. But the other thing you said is, why would one person know and why would one person not? I mean, that's one of the mysteries of precognition. It's possible some people are more skilled, but it's also possible that some people, it's more important for them to know, because what they're going to do with this piece of information is important for their life, whereas someone else knows this piece of information and that is important for their life. You know what I mean? So it might
absolutely,
like on a need to know basis.
Right. Okay, well, let me ask you this question then, because my favorite topic in this whole subculture, as I continually bring up on the show, is a word that people refer to as synchronicity.
Yeah.
How does that play into what you're saying? The way, we think of synchronicity as something, if I think of the weirdest thing, of a weird drink, that water with grapes in it or something, and then the next morning Tony shows up to work, hey, have a water with grapes in it. Like how weird and synchronistic that is. Is that similar to this, or is that a different phenomenon?
Well, I'm just thinking of water with grapes. Isn't that essentially wine? Or do you mean I'm just trying to understand the drink.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, anything.
And he likes a pink,
any
pink
sort
umbrella,
of bizarre thing that you would think of.
No, I understand. I just got sidetracked on imagining water with grapes.
I bring up wine Tuesday morning and she's already getting, I know that's. Wait till Saturday night. We're going to really.
I don't even drink, but I'm fascinated by drinking. Anyway.
There you go.
Right. So here's the deal with synchronicity. As far as I can tell, it's a thing that people talk about that has to do with their experience. The problem is it's impossible, as far as I can tell, to test in a lab, because it's all about the person's meaning, right? So I have a friend, Sky Nelson Isaacs, who's just wrote this beautiful book that's coming out soon about synchronicity and the physics of synchronicity. And, it's all about what is the meaning to you. And so while I think it's very interesting, I don't know scientifically how to compare it to precognition, although precognition might have a lot to do with synchronicity for all I know. Because in the lab, all you have to do is say, I think that was a synchronicity, and it was. That's the definition of synchronicity. There's nothing external to a person's internal meaning state that defines what synchronicity is. So I sort of say, I don't know how to test that.
To me, it's a 1,000,000,001 shot. If Tony said something so bizarre to me,
which
I heard, I don't know. I can't. Normally, I think of 100 of these. They happen every day.
I mention bizarre things every day. So
if he mentioned to me this bizarre bird or whatever that no one's ever heard of or whatever, and then I leave here and I flip on the radio and they say, we just discovered a rare bird in Africa, and it's the same one Tony was talking about. The odds of that happening are 1 in a billion to me.
Or way, way, way lower if, in fact, the reason Tony mentioned it is because he heard something on Nova or whatever about it the previous day. That's why I'm saying it's really difficult to test in a lab.
Right.
Because there's we forget, and it could be subliminal, we forget these influences. I'm not saying synchronicity doesn't exist. I experience synchronicity all the time. It's just that as an empiricist, I can't think of an experiment that would allow me to test it, except to ask people what their experience was, which I think is very interesting. And I totally think precognition could have a lot to do with that. That might be why Tony said that thing about the bird was precognitive.
I think,
but to test it in the lab is a different story.
Another example is something that I do with numbers.
Oh yeah.
We've had a numerologist on before, and we start 111 means one thing, 222 means one thing, and right before my mother passed away several months ago, I started seeing the number 222 everywhere.
Yeah.
I never noticed it before. I saw it on license plates. I saw it on clocks. I saw it on house numbers. So the synchronicity of that, I even looked. I looked down and just glance, and I never look at my
page 222.
Yeah, and I remember. How many miles do I have to go? 222. I look at the clock. It's 12. 12:22. So synchronicity like that, again, it's either I'm just more aware or there is a synchronicity of some sort.
Right. Right. I mean, you don't know. That's why you can't test it. Is that you don't know if it's what they call confirmation bias, which is once you start thinking about 222 in some kind of emotional situation, you are going to see it everywhere.
Right.
Or if it's you're actually like those things are happening. Those events are actually happening more, and that's why I end up saying I think it's interesting. I think it's important. I think Jung's writing on synchronicity is really valuable. I would recommend Skynes and Isaac's book, but then after that, I just go. I'd love to go back to things I can test. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
She's more on. She believes in telepathy and precognition as a scientist, but not necessarily as much in these other things. And that's interesting.
No, that's not. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's that I don't have
there's no ability. I mean, the synchronicities. There's no possible way to test that because they happen so randomly. By definition, you couldn't sit down in a lab and do them.
No, I was going to say, what about? Oh God, my mind just went.
Good work.
My mind went a blank. Never mind.
My mind is sharp and focused. So I will. I know we're running short on time. I know you got to go, but I would like to address one of your older books, The Unfolding, where I have not been interested in the soul or afterlife until recently on this show. We've had a lot of people on, from Mark Anthony to Richard Martini, and they've made a pretty compelling case. Now, this book's supposed to be about where you try to find the soul in science. What did you find in the lab, that the soul exists, or what is your take on the soul?
The book Unfolding is a guide to finding your soul's work, essentially your work in the world. And there's a remake of it. There's a rewrite of it that I think I would recommend that comes out on April 1st called The Calling, which is 10 years later, more than 10 years later. I've learned more and I put more in there. But they're both the same concept, which is not using science in the usual way that we use it, which is to find out facts about something, but instead using science in the way that I think scientists love using it, which is to be in a discovery process. You're the scientist of your soul. So it's not, did I discover the soul somewhere out there in the world? It's like, no, how do you discover your soul's work inside yourself and use the inspiration of the scientific process, doing experiments in your life to do that? And each person becomes
individually.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. I got it. So but by definition, then you feel clearly that we do have a soul and therefore an afterlife, is your opinion.
So I don't conflate soul with, I don't conflate soul with survival of consciousness after death.
Okay.
Yeah. I call the soul sort of the essence of who you are that's not your body. But I don't know. I'm impressed by this. So I'm good friends with Julie Beischel at the Windbridge Institute and Mark Bacuzzi at the Windbridge Research Center, and they've done the best research in the world I know on mediumship, and it's just remarkable research. And there's excellent research also at the Institute of Noetic Sciences on mediumship, and so these mediums are having the experience of talking to dead people, and they're getting veridical information, which means they're getting information that seems to be accurate at a rate higher than chance. And we don't know how they're getting it. Are they reading minds? Are they, this kind of thing? I happen to think there's some aspect of who we are survives. I happen to think there's some aspect of who we are that's different from the body. That's a belief I have that's difficult to prove. But then after we die, I don't know. My aesthetics are, and this is totally aesthetics because you can't prove this, that we all go back into the soup. There's like a universal soup, and we're recycled, and maybe a chunk of the tomato goes into the next Mozart and a chunk of the celery, So the idea that your ego lives from life to life, I think is sort of a fabricated one because our ego loves to think that it will never die. But that the sort of essence of who you are, I think might.
See, we don't need 30 minutes. We need 3 days to sit down with you and talk about these things, because this is the stuff I like to sit around with and just talk about, because it's just like hard to know. So then in that vein, if I may, I know we're running out of time, but so how do you feel about the mind-brain thing then? Do you think that the brain, some people have been on the show and they think it's just a receiver that's tapping into the Akashic records of all consciousness? Or do you think that the mind and the brain are the same? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, in the book that I did with you, Mossbridge, which is really a textbook put out by the American Psychological Association, it's a post-materialist rethinking of consciousness. So it's this idea that the brain probably doesn't create the mind. There is some relationship between the brain and the mind, that's for sure. If you've ever met anyone with brain damage, you see that there is this relationship.
No offense to you personally, Tom.
Oh, no. But I mean,
Oh, no.
but people struggle with that. But what we want to say is, like, look, there is this mental contents. There is something called the mental world, and there's a relationship with what we call the physical world of the brain. And the question is, what is the directionality of the relationship? And it's definitely not that the brain is totally responsible for creating the mind, just because there's enough evidence that doesn't support that. But how the mind might create the brain, we don't know, or if there's a co-creation going on, or you know what I mean. It's there's a lot of mystery there, and I don't ever like to foreclose too early on mystery, because mystery is where it's at.
Agreed. All these topics are so tough. Go ahead, Tony, please.
I remember.
Did Tony come
I
together?
finally remembered.
Attaboy.
Deja vu. Now, deja vu is something that we feel that we see,
Right.
have seen before. So apparently we think that we saw in the past, which means we saw the future.
It's a good one.
Deja vu, is that very similar to what we were talking about?
Actually, because it's time to go, here's what I'm going to say to that. I will answer that question because it comes up on every talk. I will answer that question at the Conscious Life Expo.
Oh, yeah. Tell us.
Saturday.
Saturday 23rd.
Oh, she's not going to tell you here on Truth Be Told.
You
She's going
have
to save it for the
go?
Conscious Life Expo.
Wow, you are a teased.
Well, part of Truth Be Told will be there this weekend, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're going to be there too, Doc. I'm sure I'll come around and we'll find you at some point.
And see her at
That'd
the
be
workshop, Decoding the Premonition Code, Saturday 23rd, 2 to 3 in Los Angeles B. So get your tickets and go see her there. So, and also, here's her latest book, The Premonition Code, and then you can go to her website, find out more about her and where she's going to be. I'm sure she's going to speak other places. So thank you. Thank you so much for being part of Truth Be Told.
Absolutely.
Thank you both.
All
It
right.
was fun.
Oh, yes, it was. So take care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you this weekend.
All right, Captain Ron, that was fun.
That's it. It was really good.
Had a great time.
She's somebody I could talk to all day. Like, she's got so many.
Well, you like the facts. So.
I do, and she
I just
seems
like the stories.
we talk about esoteric things in a fact-based way, which I really like.
All
So,
right, that's it. We got to get
see
out.
It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll see you at the Conscious Life Expo this weekend.
All right, see you. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you guys for joining us. Bye.